It's currently been over a year since Herta was released, so how does she hold up in the current meta? I hope this guide will bring light on how to properly build her, and invest her should you choose to continue using her. I may not be a pro at the game, like some of those Chinese players, but I have been clearing all three endgame modes with her for quite a long time now, so I think it's fair to say I have a decent knowledge on how to properly play her. I also want to preface by saying that I am not a theory crafter, so I do not have any actual calculations, so some of the things I say might not be entirely correct. I will not go over her kit in detail, as that information is easily accessible within the game. All you really need to know is that she is an Ice Erudition character that specializes in AoE combat. How well does Herta actually perform in the current endgame though? According to the Pride Insight, which is popular for its detailed guides and tier lists, she is currently ranked T1 in Memory of Chaos, T0.5 in Pure Fiction, and T1 in Apocalyptic Shadow. Of course, tier lists are not completely accurate, but it gives a good idea of her strength in the current meta. It is important to note that Priden actually takes its data from the current player base. As of recording this video, the current Memory of Chaos and Apocalyptic Shadow are actually quite easy for her, but that's just an exception. She's not performing as well as she used to in these modes, so I would not invest in her if your priority is clearing those modes if you have better alternatives. However, she still dominates Pure Fiction to this day. Despite the T0.5 placement, she has some of the fastest and cheapest clears, better than some of the T0 characters even. For Pure Fiction specifically, she is absolutely worth investing in. Based on my personal experience, she is still able to full clear just as if not more comfortably than my E2 Firefly, so I will die on this hill that she is still very good in Pure Fiction. If you're struggling, then you're probably playing her wrong, or you just lack her supports. So the basic gist is that she is simply not worth it anymore for Memory of Chaos and Apocalyptic Shadow, but she is still a dominant force in Pure Fiction. Besides that, the only part of her kit that you need to know is that she needs another Erudition teammate on the same team as her to proc her passive. So let's first discuss her teammate options. For the Erudition teammate, only some of them actually work with Herta. Argenti, Anaxa, Jade, Mini Herta, and Serval. The others simply do not synergize at all with her and are not worth considering. Typically, her best in slot will be Anaxa from Memory of Chaos and Apocalyptic Shadow, with Jade being her best in slot for Pure Fiction. But I'll also go over the other options. Anaxa provides a decent amount of attack frequency and can generate stacks in single target and 3-target scenarios, where Herta struggles a lot more on, due to his bounce attack nature. Furthermore, his trace provides a 50% damage bonus to all allies, and he implants weaknesses as well. However, the weakness implant does not provide any Death Shred or Rest Shred, at least not in his E0. Sadly, the buffs he provides are quite pitiful at best, and his performance suffers a lot in Pure Fiction, and this is where Jade is actually better. Jade deals a good amount of sub-DPS damage and has frequent follow-up attacks, making her the ideal teammate in Pure Fiction with Herta. The sad part about Jade is that she is barely better than Mini Herta, which we can get up to E5 for completely free. She also hasn't reran since Herta's debut in 3.0, so most people such as myself do not even own her. Instead, Mini Herta performs similar or just as well as Jade in Pure Fiction, making her a viable teammate. Mini Herta is the go-to F2P option for Pure Fiction, which makes Serval the go-to F2P option for Memory of Chaos and Apocalyptic Shadow. Unlike Mini Herta though, she is not nearly as good as Anaxa, so people do not use her as much. But she has a 1-turn ult that allows her to battery Herta faster than Mini Herta in those modes. Argenti is the odd one out, and I would not consider using him unless you have no one else or you're using Anaxa on his own team. However, he has a fast ult generation due to his passive, making him a viable option as well in all three endgame modes. Unfortunately, the buffs that any of these Erudition characters give are quite mid, which is why Herta is a bit lacking in the current meta. Regardless of which Erudition teammate you're using though, they should all be using the Ego set for more turns and ult uptime. This may change of course if you have investments in them, but those are exceptions and not the norm. For planar sets, the same logic applies. Personally, I would use Lushaka, so your Herta does more damage. The third teammate is usually the support, and in this case the obvious answer is Tribi. In some niche scenarios, Cyrene can perform better, but that's the exception, not the norm. If you do not own either, you can simply use Remembrance Trailblazer. On top of the res pen, Tribi also provides fast stack generations, and can abuse the DDD Lightcone, making her the ideal support for Herta. If you want your Herta to continue to perform in endgame, Chibi is mandatory. This is similar to how Escoffier is to Skirk in Genshin. Herta's performance will tank without Chibi. It is playable, but not comfortable. Chibi also has some of the best E1 in the game, and is worth picking up for Herta, or just in general. I want to briefly talk about other Harmony characters. They can all technically work as supports, but they provide little to no stacks, so they're generally not worth using. This is also why RMC is better than Sunday and Sparkle, because RMC actually attacks. The fourth teammate is usually the sustain, but I'll go over both sustain and sustainless options. The sustain slot can technically be anyone, but ideally it's either Danhen or Hyacing. Hyacing and Danhen both attack enough to reliably generate stacks for Herta. Both Aventry and Lingsha can also work, but they provide very little buffs or personal damage, unlike the other two. The other sustains only sustain you and provide almost nothing beyond that, so I wouldn't say they're worth using. Personally, I always got faster clear times using Hyacing over Danhen, with very few exceptions, but I have no idea which one is actually definitely better, so just use whichever one you like more. Also, I have Hyacing's Lightcone, so that might change things. For the sustainless option, the ideal teammate is almost always Remember's Trailblazer. RMC attacks quite often, which can generate stacks, and they also provide buffs to allow Herta to do even more damage. The 10% crit rate buff also allows you to tweak your build for more offensive stats. Besides RMC, Siren is usually the next best option, though I am not sure of the exact logistics, as I currently do not own Siren yet. Though some of the fastest Herta clears use her instead of Tribu or RMC. Siren attacks enough to generate stacks, and once her initial ult is used, she can make Anaxa do meaningful damage, battering Herta even further. Again, the other supports are all more or less the same. It's worth noting that Asheville makes a surprising good fourth teammate though, due to his frequent follow-up attacks. There are also leaks on Mortonak's blade, but as he isn't officially out yet, I cannot make any proper assessment on him. So far, it seems he can be a solid support for Sustainless, or even just a third teammate for sustain comps. Now let's discuss her Lightcone options. Her best in slot is obviously her signature Lightcone, Into the Unreachable Veil. It provides her crit rate and makes her SP neutral, so you don't have to worry about your SP consumption as much. Beyond just being best in slot for Herta, it's also an extremely competitive option for main DPS Anaxa, and it is also best in slot for Argentu. Other options include the Battle Pass Lightcone, Today is Another Peaceful Day, Himiko's signature, Jingren's signature. But if you really have nothing, you can always use the Herta shop Lightcone, Eternal Calculus. Now let's talk about actually building her, aka her relic options. Typically, the best in slot for a piece is always Scholar's Lost and Erudition. You could technically use the Poet set, but in my opinion, it is not worth the trouble, and it requires you to not upgrade her speed traits at all. The Scholar set provides 8% crit rate, increases skill and ultimate damage by 20%, and after using ult, next skill damage is increased by 25%. This set was tailor-made for her. It also shares the same domain as their Seiserdo set, making it a very efficient domain to farm. Her planar set is either Izumo or Rutilant Arena. Both perform roughly the same, so it is up to preference which one you want to farm, or whichever one you already had pieces for. Izumo increases attack by 12%, and if another ally follows the same path, crit rate is increased by 12%. Which works for Herta since she always wants an erudition partner anyways. Rutilant Arena increases crit rate by 8%, and increases basic and skill damage by 20% if your crit rate is over 70%. So personally, I have mine at Izumo because that was what I initially farmed, but both are fine. So for main stats, you want attack boots, crit rate or crit damage body, ice damage or attack orb, and attack robe. For substats, you want attack, crit rate, and crit damage. Speed is not important at all because Herta's ult action advances herself. It is not bad to have speed, but it doesn't really do anything. Ice damage is technically better than attack, but it's only by a little bit, so just use whichever one has better substats. If you're using Izumo, you want to be as close as 88% crit rate outside of combat, and for Rutilant Arena, it will be 100% out of combat. Personally, I would say to try to at least aim for 3.5k attack and 150 crit damage. Too little crit damage wouldn't do much, even if your crit rate is 100%. I'll quickly go over her supports as well. For the Erudition sub-DPS, it is typically Ego and Lushaka. You usually want them to be on speed boots and ERR rope. Personally, I build mine to be as fast as possible at 160 plus speed to generate stacks for Herta. you want as many turns as possible. Of course, you can also use the normal planar sets or the normal 4-piece sets, whatever it is. I sometimes leave my Anaxa on Rutilant Arena as well. So for Tribby, depending on your goals, it is either the Ego set or the Poet set. I have mine on Ego to maximize her DDD uptime, but if you're not using DDD, you can use Poet and the Bones Planar. But if you're using DDD, I suggest using either Vonvac or Lushaka as her planar set. If you're using Ego, you want fast Tribby, which means over 134 speed. And that means also using speed boots. Slow Tribby is just a normal way to build her. Quickly going over RMC and Siren, you can use 2-piece speed, the Deliver set, or the Ego set, whichever aligns best with your goals. And of course, a Lushaka planar set. Though for Siren, you might want the Vonvac set. For sustains, if you're using a healer, you would use the warrior set, and if you're using a shielder, you would use the recluse set. But regardless of whatever sustain you're using, I of course recommend the Lushaka planar set to boost your Herta. If it wasn't obvious enough, I'm a huge proponent of the Lushaka set. The buffs it provides are just too good to ignore, and can be worn by almost any character. For those who don't know, Lushaka increases the attack of the first character by 12% if the wearer is not the first character. Now let's talk briefly about investments. I think her best investments, beyond just her team, would be her Lightcone and her E2. Her E2 is technically better, but if you only have a limited amount of holes, her Lightcone would be the better option. Tribby's E1 is also one of the best investment you can make to further boost your Herta team. Beyond that would be E2 Anaxa and E2 Siren, at which then Siren will be much better than RMC. And then you can just go all in for E6 Herta. And for Pure Fiction, E1 Jade is a good investment too, if you really want to invest in that. Siren's Lightcone is best in slot for RMC and Siren herself, if that matters at all. I think that covers most of the building part, but I will also briefly go over how to actually play her. I seem to notice a lot of Herta players play her quite suboptimally. My way may not necessarily be the best, but has allowed me to consistently clear the endgame. Of course, there are some Chinese players out there who can optimize it better than I do. The main priority for Herta is ult uptime, so do not hold on to your ults unless it's for a specific reason, such as it is almost her turn, or you need her to take a turn to clear mobs. You usually want to use it immediately. Holding onto her ult usually just bleeds ult uptime and you waste more time doing nothing instead of doing actual damage. Make sure you try to stack to the number 42 if you can to maximize her damage. In some instances, you don't even need to stack to 42, such as Pure Fiction, but those are the exception, not the norm. If you're using RMC with Herta, you also don't want to coincide Mem's action advance with Herta's ult, wasting a turn that could be used to charge Herta's ult, or generate SP instead. If you're using Shirby, you should turn on the AV bar so you can see the AV of your characters. This can let you know if you should hold on to your Shirby ult to use DDD, or you should just use it immediately. This is, of course, only if you're using DDD with Shirby. A bit of an advanced tip, and I don't actually know if this is the most optimal way to play her, but if you have both Herta and Shirby ult, I typically use the Herta ult first, then when it's Herta's turn, I use Shirby's ult to trigger the DDD. This way Shirby charges Herta, and when Herta uses her enhanced skill, she charges Tribby as well. The DDD effect doesn't matter to Herta since you can just use the ult to actually advance her anyways. I also usually skill with my sub DPS either way to generate stacks for Herta if possible. Of course, SP management is crucial, so it's important to determine whether you should skill or not. Sometimes using a skill early to trigger Tribby or RMC ult could be worth it if it means more actions or more ults. I don't really have any more groundbreaking secrets, but Herta is unfortunately not a good character to leave on auto due to how the auto battle works. Even though her meta value has dropped, she is still a very solid character and can perform well in all three endgames. She is nowhere near as tragic as Akron is right now. She struggles a bit, but she is still very capable of clearing all endgames, and is not as bad as some people make it out to be. That's about the entire updated Herta guide I made for 4.2. It's my first video, so forgive my stuttering. If you found it helpful, it would mean a lot if you can like and subscribe, as I might continue making more Star Rail related content in the future.